Can music change the world? There are countless songs, countless pieces of work in the music community, in the industry, wishing that it could change the world for a better world. Getting rid of war, getting rid of racism, getting rid of sexism and violence and all the bad stuff, getting rid of crime, getting rid of all of it. Can music do this? There are countless songs, where the lyrics talk about, if I could just write the right song and the right lyrics, maybe I could fix the world. Maybe I could get rid of poverty and hunger. And this is a sentiment that's expressed across all genres of music. Vince Gill, just thinking offhand here, if I had it my way, there'd be no poverty, there'd be no this and that and the next thing. We Are the World, Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson, and the whole musical community that sang that song. Yes, it was to raise awareness and money, but there was a sentiment in that song that maybe, the world would be a better place because of it. Maybe it would help people and politicians and all kinds of people get better, treat people with more respect. There is a kind of unity. You felt like you felt somehow closer to your neighbor when you heard that song, not ever having talked to them even. There are countless songs like this. There are protest songs. Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan. Some of those songs helped people think about life, and they helped a group of people stand up against problems in the world, in their community. One of the great things that happened after Woodstock, or one of the comments that you often hear of the people living in that area, and then throughout the country, and in several documentaries since then, was the fact that music had the power of gathering massive amounts of people in peace. And that's a really hard thing to do. Usually when there are massive amounts of people in one area, the interactions and the different levels of psychology and intentions oftentimes clash. It's very hard to gather that many people without problem. And Woodstock helped prove that it could be done. And this was probably one of the first of that style that showed businessmen and showed communities and showed artists that this was something doable. I remember in the 90s when I learned about Grateful Dead and how they literally had thousands and thousands of people following them on their tour, going from place to place, usually doing outdoor festivals. Fish is another one where there were literally thousands and thousands of people outside enjoying the moment. Now, some people, more informed than others, will say, well, they were probably in a state of zen or camaraderie because of the funny cigarettes they were smoking. Okay. Needless to say, music showed us that it could gather people together and keep the peace in massive numbers. I think there have been far more songs that helped people think about their lives than having brought peace to the world. So, but indirectly, a song that helps you think about life does bring, or in any case, it has brought me peace. How many times have I heard a Bob Dylan song that just washed away a lot of confusion? And that's what Bob Dylan did in the 20th century to a lot of people. And probably added some ambiguous sentiments or stirred the pot, so to say, to think beyond. But he was right up there as an ambassador to the existential questions. A lot of the music in the hippie movement, which he was also a part of, did that. But my question is, can music can music change the world? On a global scale, or on a very large regional scale, if you will. For a country, for a community, large communities, large areas. Can it do this? Neil Young is another one that, like Bob Dylan, I think helped people think about things. Joni Mitchell, all of that stuff is really tied into the hippie movement. Even though Neil Young is not hippie, it's still, excuse me, it's still, I think, attracted a lot of the people that enjoyed that movement. He also got into a lot of political things, which he regrets having done. So he does see that music does have an impact on people. That's for sure. What you play, what you say, your intentions, it does affect community. It does affect the way people think about life, not just about you and the music. It does alter your behavior without being intoxicated with alcohol and drugs. It does it on pure air. It does affect fashion probably in an indirect way, but it does contribute to your sense of style and taste. It's a little bit easier to talk about those things with visual arts because it's right there. You see it. In music, it takes a little bit longer, I imagine, to digest topics that aren't in direct lineage with the music itself. There's a phrase in the movie High Fidelity where John Cusack says, in so many words, I forget exactly, but you'll get the meaning. I think it was either sad or depressed. Are we depressed because we listened to this music? Or the other way around, Did music affect us or did we affect the music? So there's always been sad, depressed, happy, same deal. There's always been kind of an unspoken question of what is fueling the other stuff in music and certainly in art. And it probably is fair to say that it's both. That one fuels music, and then in return, music fuels your life and how you behave. And I think it's fair to say that it's not just one or the other. There's a mix of both. But the question still remains, can music change the world? And this question is directly related to a very nasty word when it comes to art. It's a word that artists you will find of every domain, some of which do not like at all, and that's called responsibility. Do you feel that you have a responsibility in society as an artist? Or do you feel like you have a responsibility to you and that's it, and the world takes it as it is? They're very different approaches, and they oftentimes cause intense debates. You will find artists, musicians that don't want the responsibility, that don't think it's there, that don't think it's good to include that word in their lives as an artist. And you will find the other crowd that believes the exact opposite, that it is important to take responsibility, that it is important to be responsible for what you're saying, what you're doing. In other words, and what does that mean? Well, that means looking at the music, if we're talking about musicians, looking at the music you're playing and the things you're saying and how you're behaving when you play this music, as much as even where you're doing it at. If you take responsibility, then you are conscious of the impact of those things to the people you're playing them to. So that responsibility might prevent you from advocating violence. It might prevent you from proposing to beat up your wife or your husband. It might prevent you from initiating an argument with somebody of another culture or another race or another gender, because you see, you're not blind and deaf, you see that music does have an impact. And it does affect people's ideas of life and existence and relationships. So if you have that responsibility, that sense of responsibility, that will probably invite you more to do things that unite people, things that bring peace and cooperation. This is not unheard of. There are styles intended for this. Love songs, romantic songs. There are styles that serve the people. And the musicians and the people that are involved in producing those songs, it's apparent, feel somewhat responsible for the activity that goes on when people are listening to those songs. So you have these schools of thought where a very large community of musicians do believe in the responsibility of their surroundings and their culture, and do recognize the direct impact that it has on a community, and do create music to enhance that community's cooperation and love and peace. And then you have another school of musicians that disregard all of that, even though it's very apparent that it happens. Another school of artistic thought is, that's not my problem. Who knows what it's going to do? Maybe somebody will hurt somebody listening to a love song. Who knows? And that approach will lend itself to, first off, confusion as to what life is, but it will lend itself to messages, performances, venues that might not be appropriate for the music that's being played. It will lend itself to humoring the state of the musicians themselves and using music more as a therapy instead of an interaction. what does all that mean? It means that if I'm really, 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 really mad at the world or at just life in general, I'm not going to um, I'm just going to express that anger and be very, very violent and angry and have messages that are very, very aggressive and hurtful, racist, discriminatory, all those kinds of things, uh, as a um, as a therapy, kind of saying to everybody, "Hey, this is happening to me. Hey, I went through this." And who's to say, blues does do that a little bit. And there are songs in blues with lyrics in blues that can be very violent. But blues tends to be, when they are violent, it tends to be violently sad. It tends to be, in a sense, there's a more of a maturity and a reflection on oneself in the blues format than, say, in certain metal songs. And this is not at all a bash on metal or any aggressive music. You can have very hateful messages and very sexist, discriminatory behavior in all styles. And now, since the styles seem to be blurring, it's a very complicated, heated debate. And it has been around since art has been around. But the question still remains. Can music change the world? So all of that stuff is tied into that question. And this post is here to say, yes. And I'm going to show you how it did. In America, 1940s, 1950s, what was happening? Blues, jazz, rock and roll, folk music, Bob Dylan. So, the Beatles had not come around yet. The Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, all those people had not come around yet. Jimi Hendrix had not come around yet. Elvis, Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, Sinatra, all of the blues and jazz artists were there, burning. And in society in America, at that time, if you know a little bit of history of America during that time, there were massive social problems, political social problems, notably called the civil rights, where black people and white people were at war with each other. Not only physically, terribly, but mentally, intellectually, philosophically, culturally, in all domains. And sadly, even some of the musicians, but more of the people that were involved, from what I've recognized, were not in, how should I say, the majority appear to not be musicians and artists, but just the working class. Now, I'm sorry if that's not exactly true, but I think it's a fair assessment. The working class and the poor class, and certainly the rich. But what I mean to say is it wasn't, the civil rights did not occur because the musicians wanted it to. Musicians typically want peace. Most of us, and artists included. So, Civil War was going on, or the civil rights was going on. And I guess there was TV back then, right? Just started. You were able to see the color of somebody's skin on TV. And because of the civil rights and because of the people in charge, most of the skin colors you were seeing were white. Radio was very powerful, and radio was able to disguise the color of your skin. And so there were artists that seemed to sneak in on the other channels, on the white channels and on the black channels. But not very many. The civil rights movement was explosive, and it was crazy. Not going to go into that. Martin Luther King was also there. This is around that time as well, right? And a man working in the automobile industry, not thinking very much about civil rights, probably just thinking about his passion for music. He seems like a very intelligent guy. He probably had a notion of what he was doing, of course, right? But I think the initial idea was how to make money and how to enhance his community and how to share with the world his perception of music as an artist would. So coming out of the automobile industry in a place called Detroit, he creates a record label, very little money, and calls it Motown, Hitsville, USA. And the objective was singles. Let's make singles, not albums. Which is funny because now everybody's complaining about how the world is on singles again and not albums. Well, at that time, that was his point of view, singles. And the objective was, let's make music to make people happy. That would appeal to everybody. And the musicians he used, most of them were black. And you can think of it kind of like the way a movie works. You have a movie and you start saying, well, who would be good for this part? And so he would hire people like Smokey Robinson, Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, the Four Tops, the Marvelettes, tons. An explosion of artists came out of Motown. The band in the back tended to be a unit. The drummers I know were rotating around in that unit were Pistol Allen, Benny Benjamin, Uriel Jones, and there were horn sections, string sections that were tracked afterwards before he would compose a lot of the music with the other composers of the label, and then hire the singers to come in and the musicians to make that song happen. Okay, nothing new here, right? Actually was new, but nothing shocking really yet. Actually was very shocking, but as far as this post is concerned, I'm still not answering that question. Does music change the world? Yes. In Motown, and Motown is a wonderful example of how music changed the world. It really happened. The music that was played, that was composed, wasn't your typical black music or white music. Somehow, the compositions managed to deny a very strong identification of these two cultures, whilst having extreme ingredients from both in every single song. When you look at the rhythm section, it's a lot of shuffles and blues. That's notoriously black. Stereotypically black, right? There are white bluesmen, but a lot of shuffles and blues. When you look at the melodies, they do sound blues from time to time, but they also sound pop. They also sound cute and lighthearted, contrary to what blues would do. There's a lot of other things that were blended together in Motown that make Motown one of the most beautiful moments in music history for several different reasons, but I'm even getting worked up thinking about it. I wasn't expecting that. Motown was so powerful that the younger people and the older people were able to think beyond skin color and beyond race and beyond culture. And when you heard Mr. Postman, you didn't think black or white. You just heard the song. And this happens on every Motown song. You are not asked to question, is this person white or black, purple, yellow, brown, green, whatever. You're invited to have a good time. The lyrics tended to be around, they weren't all completely lighthearted, but they tended to be around love. Some of them were anthem-ish. Motown definitely has a quality of the anthem, which suggests standing up for yourself, but without completely going into the realm of Pete Seeger and the protest song, right? And during the time of the civil rights, Motown taught people that there was I apologize for doing this in two parts. It's not scripted, but I just kind of got so worked up by the notion, by the memory, by imagining that moment in the early 60s when Motown was born, and I just kind of had to regroup myself and my thoughts. I've spent the last 2 weeks diving into this style and the context of Motown and all the musicians involved, and been teaching it extensively, and so it's really close to my heart, what I'm talking about. So I'm going to try and move on here. Motown is the answer to that very difficult question: can music change the world? And Motown responds, yes. In a very concrete way. There were instances in the past where musicians crossed the aisle and in their own way managed to help the black culture and the white culture intermingle. And one of the big artists was Ray Charles, and the public even at that time, I'm pretty sure it was with the song "Mess Around," where the public, some of the public, were startled at how easy the black and white community were able to intermingle and associate with each other and enjoy each other's company with that song. Racists were startled. How can you do this? There's a story of Chuck Berry in Cadillac Records where rock and roll has just exploded or about to, and Chuck Berry goes to a venue to play, and they didn't realize he wasn't white. Chuck Berry had very dark skin. Um, he was of an Indian origin, but was categorized. This is all blah blah, for people who know that it's all wrong anyway, but was categorized as a black person. Who the hell gives a crap? But anyway, that's the that's the logistics of that moment. And they wouldn't let him play. But just goes to show you that they initially liked his music and didn't think twice about white or black or orange or red or yellow or whatever. And it was only when they saw him that they said, no, this is not possible, we're not doing this. Motown was so powerful that thing that happened with Chuck Berry and with Ray Charles resisting or complaining, as they did with the Ray Charles song, it didn't seem to take ground. It couldn't hold on. It couldn't compete against the overwhelming joy that the young people had for this music. It was too much. It wasn't just a song. It wasn't just an artist. There were hundreds of songs. I mean, when you go to a compilation album of the best of Motown, it's not on one CD. It's easily on 3 and oftentimes on 5. And that's not even the complete output of what Motown was. One of my students was so worked up by the Motown lessons that I was giving, he went back and looked into his discography. He's an older gentleman. He came back and he said, John, I realized I have the complete discography. 50 CDs. 50. He used to work for a television company and he got the complete discography. 50 CDs of all of the Motown songs, which goes to show you that this was not just one-hit wonders in a sense and then gone. And the radio, the environment was literally flooded with this new sound. Flooded. And there are documentaries that talk about how in Detroit, you were listening to Motown in your car, in stores, in maybe a diner, and then you'd see the Four Tops walk by. That's how it was for them in Detroit. I would have loved to just time capsule or, just go back in time into Detroit, not for obviously the civil rights and all the racism, but to be a fly on the wall and see the Four Tops walk by the street and hear their song in the car that just comes by, you know, and then see Smokey Robinson, and then see Marvin Gaye, and then see Diana Ross, just, you know. And those artists, that's just a handful. But there were literally hundreds, thousands, I imagine. But when you consider all of the strings and all of the horn activity and all the other stuff that's going on behind those songs, that's why it wasn't completely black. The singers, I can't think of one white singer, but there were a lot of horns and there was a lot of there were a lot of arrangements. So I gather there must have been a mix within that department of strings and horns going on. Maybe not, but you know what? It's not really a big deal. That's not what I want to make a point of. It was so overwhelming, literally flooded the radio, and was so overwhelming, literally the TV at that time could not resist. Because in a world of capitalism and businessmen, if you're racist, it's so funny. It's horrible, but anyway, money is the final say. Always has been. So even amongst the racists, they didn't even have dignity of themselves in their thoughts. It was obviously completely shallow, stupid perspective of, and it always has been. Anyway. But Motown literally broke down that wall. People could not resist it. Racists could not resist it. Here's a personal note. My grandfather used to own a record store. And he had his record store during that time of the Motown explosion. He had it during the time of rock and roll as well. And he was one of those old school guys that was borderline racist. Borderline. And it breaks my heart to admit that. But it was a different time back then. And he sucks because of it. However, he wasn't completely derailed enough to stall or prevent Motown from being sold in his shop. And he sold tons of Motown records. I know firsthand. That's how strong it was. Now, let me try and create a moment for you. It's one thing to just talk about this, but I want to try and explain, create a scenario where you can see how this worked. Let's say, think of a racist, a white guy, racist. There are black, but in this case it's white. A white racist. And Motown comes along on the radio, in the record stores, Motown comes along. And he's driving in his car, he or she, it's not a masculine thing, he or she's driving in the car. Motown song comes on. You could not hear Motown at this period. That's how much it overwhelmed everybody. And it's on the radio, on the white radio, and he's digging it. It's a nice song. It's lighthearted, it's got a good beat, makes you feel good. You might talk to a girl or a guy or whoever, you know, and life goes on. It feels good. It might even motivate you to do something really nice in your life. And time goes by, and this person here's another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And this just keeps going on. Literally assaulted with this in a positive way on the radio. Doesn't think twice. Just says, wow, this is, life is great. Wonderful, nice vibe. Driving in my Chevy, driving in my, the cars of the time were also beautiful, right? Got beautiful music, beautiful people, la la la. Granted, civil rights was like right around the corner, literally, but anyway. Never thinks once about it. And then one day, and on top of which, now let's say he has children. His children love it. Just go bananas over it, which is what they did. Going nutso over it. Everybody's having a good time. Everybody, literally. And one day, he goes to the record store and buys the record and let's say no, I can't do that. He goes to the record store, buys the record. He's going to buy a record for his son or daughter. And he looks at the record, and this one in particular shows a face on the cover. And it's Diana Ross. And in that moment, he realizes he was wrong. She realizes she was wrong. Because Diana Ross is black. Well, how dare I? That can't be possible. I can't like black music. I can't believe this. Something like that happened. Must have happened several times to literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And in that moment, that man or woman must have said, you know what? Maybe I have to rethink this. Because I really like that song. And my children really love that song. And I've kissed my wife or my husband listening to that song. And look, here's another one. This one, I have wonderful memories with this song. And here's another one, and another one, and another one. Selling 45s, right? Not albums. And you couldn't resist recognizing the fact in this case that these people were liking black music. You couldn't resist it. It was too much. And then when this man now or woman comes out of the store with his record, let's hope he bought it, hypothetically, comes out and he sees the cars go by and they're all listening to Motown. And he sees everybody having a good time. And then he's thinking, or she's thinking, and they go into a diner. And he can't believe this. She can't believe this. I can't believe that I like this music. Is something wrong with me? And they go into a diner and they think about it and they get a cup of coffee. And what comes on the radio? Baby, I need your lovin'. And he's looking around, or she's looking around. What's going on? Have we just, can you imagine? That's what happened. Not just to this one person, but to several people. To the young people, they just jumped on and didn't think twice. Not once did they ask that question, because young people, God bless them, don't have those perspectives unless they've been instilled those perspectives by their parents or other people in their environment older than them, trying to get them to jump on the bandwagon. But the young people just went with it and recognized this is great music. That has never happened before with music. There have been explosions of joy, notably Elvis with rock and roll and Chuck Berry, but Elvis was moving his hips, and rock and roll was the loud music for the kids, and the adults weren't totally on that wagon. Even though they were seeing white people play it, they still were like, well, that's for the kids. Motown talked about stuff that was of a little bit more mature dialogue. Not that rock and roll didn't. Rock and roll was insinuated those things, but Motown got a little bit more explicit without getting explicit, and it appealed to the adult class. That's the big difference. And the adults, unlike how they responded to rock and roll, the adults saw Motown as something that they could listen to in their living room with their family. It was something that they accepted. The singers, the lyrics were adapted, were written with the intention of appealing to everybody. It was irresistible. Motown literally was irresistible. And I imagine it destroyed a lot of the seeds that are planted in people, notably in the young people, about the seed of racism. It destroyed a lot of those seeds. So the young people of the 60s. And it rewired a lot of the adults that had notions of racism and discrimination. Because now all of a sudden, don't beat up that guy. I love that song that he wrote. You see? Not only do I love it, I want to talk to him. Let me go buy him some coffee. Let's go to the diner and hang out. Maybe he'll sing me a song. It was like that. Never has this ever happened before in music to this extent. Explosions, yes, but literally destroying the racial wall that had been built up right in the moment of the civil rights. It's like a bunch of angels came down. I don't know what our world would be like without Motown, if Motown had not come around. But there is proof that music can change the world. It can, and it did. And it's called Motown. If you want to get into Motown a little bit, there's actually not very many documentaries. Unbelievably, there are copies of the same documentary a lot of times, but there's not a tremendous amount of authentic footage of the music being recorded. It's very hard to see. You have to read about it and look into the liner notes. But if you want to jump into Motown, a great starting point is the compilation Motown Gold by Tama. And that will take you back. The quality is outstanding, and you can really see what music was doing before the Beatles, before the Rolling Stones, before Led Zeppelin, before Jimi Hendrix, before all of that stuff. God bless every single one of those people. That's it. More news soon. Ciao.